20 of the most common questions about Toyota hybrids, answered straight. What the battery really costs to replace. What actually fails on these cars. What the factory maintenance schedule quietly leaves off the list. And which of the things the showroom told you is flatly untrue. That is the whole deal. Let me earn it. I have pulled the rear seat cushions out of more of these than I can remember, and nearly always for the same reason. To get at a plastic air vent about the size of a paperback, every time the same thing comes out with it. A gray felt mat of carpet fibers, pet hair, and grit. That vent cools a battery pack worth more than some people's first car. It is not on your maintenance schedule. That's question 6, and I'll say it now. It is the cheapest job on this entire list, and it protects the single most expensive part on the car. Question 12 is a brake component that can run past $3,000, has nothing whatsoever to do with pads or rotors, and that most owners never hear named until a buzzer starts going off. And question 14 is the one that got me genuinely irritated while I was checking figures. A specific engine failure on a specific run of model years that Toyota's own service bulletins acknowledge in detail, and that Toyota's own maintenance schedule has no line item to prevent. None of this is anti-hybrid. I like these cars. What's inside a Toyota hybrid transaxle is some of the most honest engineering anybody has put in a mass market car in 30 years. And I'll show you why at question 4. Here is the thread that runs through all 20. The mechanical guts of a Toyota hybrid are simpler and tougher than the ones in a conventional car. Fewer moving parts, less stress on the engine, brakes that barely get used. Almost every genuinely expensive failure on these cars is not wear. It is heat, or it is hydraulics. Something that got hot because air stopped moving, or something that leaked internally where you couldn't see it. Hold that in your head, and about 18 of these 20 questions answer themselves. Question 1. Do you have to plug it in, and is it really self-charging? No plug, and no. The gasoline engine and the brakes put every electron into that battery, which means every mile of electric running was paid for at the pump. That word got tested in public, by the way. Norway's Consumer Authority banned Toyota's self-charging hybrid advertising in 2020 on the grounds that it was misleading to suggest the power going into the battery was free when burning gasoline is the necessary condition for producing it. Britain's advertising regulator looked at a near-identical complaint and ruled the phrase acceptable, which is why you still see it in British ads. 2 regulators, same words, opposite answers. Believe the physics, not the copywriter. And you cannot run one on the battery alone with an empty tank. Toyota's own guidance says the car must have fuel in it, and trying to run it electric only without fuel will cause damage. Question 2. How long does the hybrid battery actually last? Longer than the internet told you in 2009. Data from high-mileage fleets, taxi and rideshare cars running 300,000 to 400,000 miles, shows packs regularly going past 200,000 miles, with only gradual capacity loss, and documented Prius taxis have exceeded 300,000 on the original pack. The reason is design discipline. Toyota deliberately never charges the pack full or drains it empty, and that narrow operating window is most of why these things age so slowly. By the way, if you drive a Toyota and want to keep it running for hundreds of thousands of miles, what you do before something breaks matters far more than most owners realize. That's why I put together the 500K Mile Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your Toyota last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot mechanic upsells that quietly drain your wallet. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera, or grab it from the first pinned comment below. Degradation is a slope, not a cliff. Figure roughly 20 to 30% capacity loss by 200,000 miles, and the first thing you notice is fuel economy sagging a couple of miles per gallon a year, not a warning light. Here's the counterintuitive part that shops will tell you and brochures won't. The more you drive one, the longer the pack lives. Batteries that sit uncycled break down, and specialists recommend driving these every day or two. Heat is the other lever. Consistently hot climates give shorter battery life, full stop. Which is my honest caveat. The number is not national. A Phoenix car and a Portland car are not the same car. Question 3. What does a new pack cost? Sources disagree here, badly, and I'll take the conservative view. A new factory pack from a Toyota dealer runs somewhere around $2,700 to $4,000 installed, though dealer literature itself quotes a range as wide as $2,000 to $8,000 depending on model. Assume $4,000 and you won't be shocked. The independent hybrid trade sells the same job for roughly $1,000 to $2,500, with brand new cells carrying a 48-month warranty and remanufactured packs, typically 12 months. 2 hours of labor for a shop that does nothing else. Read the warranty term, not the headline price, because that is the entire difference between those two options. Question 4. Is it a CVT, and is it going to fail? It is not a CVT, and this is the part I actually enjoy. Toyota calls it an eCVT, but there is no belt-driven variator in there. It's a power split transaxle built around a planetary gear set and 2 electric machines that continuously vary how engine and motor torque are shared. No belts, no chains. Which is exactly why the thing is as durable as it is. Picture a seesaw with 3 seats instead of 2. The engine sits in the middle, one end bolted to a generator, the other end to the wheels. Nobody is shifting anything. If you want the engine to sit at a particular speed, you don't move a lever, you just decide how hard that generator resists being turned. Let it spin freely, and the engine's effort goes nowhere. Load it up, and the engine has to push against the wheels. Ratio is managed by controlling the flow of electricity through those 2 motor generators. That's the whole trick. No torque converter to slip, no clutch pack to burn, no band to wear. The reason your Prius seems to shift without steps is that it never had steps to begin with. Owners have grumbled for 20 years that Toyota shouldn't have hung the letters CVT on it. And I think they're right, because it invites people to fear a failure mode this box does not have. What it can suffer is bearing wear and a fried motor winding, both rare and both usually downstream of heat or contaminated fluid. Which brings us straight to the next one. Question 5. Does the transaxle fluid need changing? Officially, mostly no. These take genuine ATFWS, and under normal driving, the schedule calls for inspection rather than a fixed replacement interval, dropping to around 60,000 miles if you meet severe service conditions. My read, and I'll flag it as a read rather than a fact. Change it anyway. No fluid is genuinely lifetime. Heat and contamination degrade even good synthetics, and this is one of the easiest fluid jobs on any modern car. About 4.9 quarts in the front unit, 1.9 in the rear on all-wheel drive. Drain plug out. Fill until it runs back out. No filter and no pan to drop. Right. Question 6. The vent. On most Prius generations, the hybrid battery is air-cooled, and it breathes your cabin air through an intake down by the rear seat. Toyota's service guidance says, inspect that intake filter for dust and lint every 5,000 miles and clean it every 20,000. Ask yourself when anybody last mentioned that to you at a service visit. Pet owners are the worst case because dog and cat hair is an extremely effective filter medium and the rear seat is where it collects. Restrict that airflow and the pack cooks. A badly clogged fan can set an overheat code with pack temperatures climbing past 150 degrees. On the 2004 to 2009 cars, it's worse, no intake filter at all. So the fan itself becomes the filter, collecting everything until it clogs. Shops in dusty, hot regions recommend cleaning fan and duct every 2 years or 30,000 miles. A shop will charge you somewhere around $389 for that service, with quotes as high as $497 in some markets. Doing it yourself costs an afternoon and a trim tool. And here's the line I want you to remember, because it's the seed of an argument I'm making later. That filter is routine maintenance and is not covered by the hybrid battery warranty. And if a clogged filter contributed to the battery overheating, Toyota may decline warranty coverage on the resulting battery repair. Question 7. So what actually kills a hybrid battery? Heat and stillness. Heat from a blocked vent, heat from a hot climate, heat from a parking lot in August, and long periods of sitting where the cells never cycle. Everything you can do about pack life is on that list, and none of it involves babying the throttle. Drive it, keep it cool, keep the vent clean. Question 8. What about the 12-volt battery, and why does the whole car go stupid when it's weak? A Prius has no starter motor. The 12-volt battery isn't cranking an engine, it's booting the computers that then close the high-voltage relays, which is why these cars use an absorbed glass matte battery rather than a conventional flooded one. Typical life is 3 to 5 years. When it's on its way out, you don't get slow cranking. You get gremlins, warning lights and constellations, doors that won't unlock. A car that acts possessed. Before you chase a single one of those faults, load test the 12-volt. I've watched people spend real money diagnosing a $250 battery. Question 9. Can you jump start one? Yes. You use the designated 12-volt jump terminal under the hood, and you never, under any circumstances, put cables on the high-voltage pack. That pack runs at several hundred volts and is governed by a battery management system that has no idea what you're doing. Question 10. Can it be flat-towed behind a motorhome? Generally, no. Most hybrids are not approved for towing with all 4 wheels on the ground. It's a flatbed or a dolly, per the manufacturer's instructions. The reason is mechanical rather than electrical. The wheels are permanently coupled to a motor generator, and dragging that down the interstate for 400 miles with nothing cooling it is not a plan. Stop and notice the pattern, because it has now shown up 5 separate times. Every question so far has resolved the same way. The drivetrain is fine, and the risk lives in cooling, in a filter, in a fluid, in a small cheap thing nobody assigned to anybody. From here, the stakes go up. The next stretch is where the money is, the brake system that fails without warning, the engine fault that costs an engine, and the one Toyota knew about. Before we go there, if you're getting something out of this, subscribe. That's the whole ask, and it's the only time I'll make it. 10 questions left, and the expensive ones are all still ahead, starting with the reason your brake pads outlast everyone else's and why that's not entirely good news. Question 11. Why do hybrid brakes last so long? And what actually wears out? Regenerative braking means the motor does most of your slowing and the friction brakes only step in near the end. Owners routinely report original pads past 100,000 miles against 30 to 50,000 on a conventional car. The catch is corrosion. In a normal car, constant friction keeps the rotor faces scrubbed clean. On a car that leans on regen, that self-cleaning barely happens, and rust builds on rotors and hardware. On plenty of these, rusted hardware and seized calipers, not worn friction material, are what finally forces a brake job. Your brake budget shifts from replacing parts to fluid service and caliper work. So once a year, pull a wheel, clean and grease the caliper slides, and look at both faces of the rotor. Judging these brakes by pad thickness through a wheel spoke tells you almost nothing. Question 12, as promised. The brake actuator. On these cars, the pedal is not directly pushing your calipers. It's an input to an electronically controlled braking system with an electric pump, a pressure accumulator, and a control module. And the computer decides how much of your stop comes from the motor and how much from hydraulics. When the seals inside that assembly start weeping internally, the pump runs longer and longer to hold pressure, and eventually you get codes. A failed actuator drops the car into fail-safe, disabling anti-lock, electronic brake force distribution, and regenerative braking at once. The pedal goes hard, and stopping distances go up sharply. Replacement runs roughly $1,900 to $4,600 done professionally. Toyota has acknowledged it more than once in writing. A warranty extension program for the 2004 to 2011 cars, long since expired, and a customer support program on the 2012 to 2014 Prius 5 that extended coverage on the booster and pump assemblies out to 10 years or 150,000 miles. If your dash lights up with brake, ABS, and stability warnings together, and then a buzzer starts nagging, that's not a sensor. Stop driving it. Question 13. Do hybrids work in the cold? They work. They just get thirsty. The federal figures put hybrid fuel economy down 20 to 40% in cold city driving and 25 to 45% on short trips. That's worse than a conventional car, and the reason is almost funny. Your cabin heat comes from engine coolant, so on a freezing morning, the engine has to keep running to warm you, which is precisely the thing a hybrid exists to avoid. Long idle warm-ups make it worse because idling returns 0 miles per gallon. A 3-mile trip at 20 degrees is the worst case there is. Question 14. Is the gasoline engine less durable? Normally the opposite. And then there's the exception. The engine in these runs the Atkinson cycle, which trades away low-end torque in exchange for extracting more work from each expansion and hands the torque problem to the electric motor to solve. Toyota's hybrid 2.0-liter dynamic force engine reaches 41% peak thermal efficiency against roughly 25% for a typical gasoline engine, and the 2.5-liter hybrid unit hits the same figure using cooled exhaust gas recirculation alongside Atkinson operation. It also spends its life switched off at every light and loaded at its efficient sweet spot rather than lugged and revved. That's a gentler existence than most engines get. Now the exception, and it's a big one. The 2ZR-FXE in the third-generation Prius, 2010 through 2015, is notorious for problems in its exhaust gas recirculation system, severe carbon and oil sludge through the whole circuit. The recirculation passages inside the intake manifold don't clog evenly. Cylinder 1 seals off with carbon first, then 2, then down the line. The cylinder that stops receiving cooled exhaust loses the cooling that gas was providing and starts running hotter than the engine was designed for. That uneven, localized heat is widely believed to be the primary cause of the platform's infamous head gasket failures. I'll be honest, that widely believed is doing real work in that sentence. The trade has several overlapping hypotheses, including wider thermal cycling and excessive oil consumption on early examples making the clogging worse, and I haven't seen anyone settle it. The oil consumption is documented, though. Some of these burn a quart every 1,000 to 2,000 miles from piston rings that don't seal properly, and Toyota extended warranty coverage on it to 10 years or 150,000 miles, with formal bulletins for the inspection and for the piston and ring repair. The symptom to know is what the trade calls the morning shake. Coolant seeping into a cylinder overnight, the engine stumbling on 3 cylinders on startup until the piston pushes it out, then smoothing over. Hybrid specialists deal with all of this by cleaning the recirculation system as standard, changing oil every 5,000 miles rather than stretching it, and fitting an upgraded head gasket as preventive work past 150,000 miles. Parts to clean the system yourself run about $150 to $450. A head gasket after the fact is $1,200 to $2,500 or more. Question 15. Can you tow with one? More than you'd guess, and it depends on trim in ways that look arbitrary. On the 2026 RAV4, front drive versions and the LE all-wheel drive are rated at 1,750 pounds, while the other all-wheel drive trims are rated at 3,500, double what the previous generation's all-wheel drive cars were allowed. Owners digging through the spec sheets found that the all-wheel drive models get an upgraded transmission oil cooler, and the LE does not, which would explain the split. And that's the most plausible reason I've seen, though I can't point you at Toyota saying it. Note what the deciding factor is, not the engine. Cooling. Again. Question 16. Why do thieves love these cars? Because a hybrid's catalytic converter carries more precious metal than a normal car's, and on the 2004 to 2009 Prius in particular, it unbolts rather than needing to be cut. At the peak, that generation was 40 times more likely to generate a theft claim than the average vehicle. Rhodium went from about $1,700 an ounce in early 2018 to over $27,000 in February 2021, and the thefts followed the price. They've come down since, roughly 23% in early 2025. But nearly 28,000 converters were still stolen in 2023. Replacing one on a Prius is generally $2,000 to $3,000. A steel shield is around $250, under $300 installed, and takes about an hour. That is the clearest cost-benefit calculation on this entire list. Question 17. Can you work on one yourself? Most of it, yes. Oil, filters, brakes, the cooling vent, the transaxle fluid, spark plugs. What you leave alone is anything orange. Those packs operate at over 200 volts, and mishandling them can be fatal, and the job needs the safety plug pulled, the right gloves, and a procedure, not confidence. Question 18. Does a hybrid actually save you money? Sometimes, and the honest answer depends on your annual mileage, not on the badge. The EPA reckons a Corolla hybrid saves about $3,000 in fuel over 5 years against the average new vehicle, at roughly $950 a year in gas, and the 2026 Prius is rated at up to 57 miles per gallon combined. Compare that to the premium you're paying, and remember it cuts the other way too. The 2026 Camry and RAV4 are hybrid only, so there's no longer a cheaper gas version to compare against. Here's the part the payback spreadsheet always leaves out. The brakes last 3 times as long, the engine leads a softer life, and the transaxle has no clutches to burn. Fuel is the headline. Attrition is the real saving. Question 19. Is a high-mileage used hybrid a bad buy? Not automatically, and I'd rather give you a procedure than an opinion. Pull the service records and confirm oil intervals. Stretched oil changes are what lead to consumption problems, which prematurely clog the recirculation system. Get a battery health check that reads individual block voltages, not a green tick on a printout. Check the in-service date, because on 2020 and later cars, the hybrid battery warranty transfers to you with whatever's left of the 10 years or 150,000 miles. Take the backseat cushion out in the parking lot and look at the vent. And on a 2010 to 2015 Prius specifically, start it stone cold in the morning and listen for the shake. If it's had the recirculation system cleaned and the head gasket done, that's a plus, not a red flag. Question 20. What happens when the Pacinelli dies? 3 routes: dealer replacement, a specialist's new cell or remanufactured pack, or module-level repair, where a shop replaces the weak blocks and rebalances the rest. Module work is the cheapest and the shortest lived, and it makes sense on a car you're keeping 2 more years, not 10. Whatever you choose, a dead pack is a repair bill, not the end of a car. And the price of that bill has been falling for a decade while the price of everything else went up. So, the turn. What is coming for you here is not a villain. It's a document. The factory maintenance schedule is a list somebody wrote, and it was written to a purpose: to get the car cleanly through its warranty term at the lowest defensible cost. It was never written to get your car to 300,000 miles, and nobody ever told you that, because it arrives in your glove box in the same tone of voice as engineering advice. Look at what it leaves out. There is no maintenance reminder for the battery cooling vent, the item that governs the life of the most expensive part on the car. Cleaning it is classed as routine maintenance and is not covered under the battery warranty. And then the sentence that ought to make you sit up. If a clogged filter contributed to the battery overheating and being damaged, Toyota may decline warranty coverage on the resulting repair. Read that twice. The consequence can be moved onto you for neglecting a job the schedule never clearly told you to do, on a part nobody at the service desk mentioned, in a place you'd need to remove furniture to see. Same shape on the 3rd generation Prius. Toyota's own bulletins describe the oil consumption in detail and set out the piston and ring repair, and coverage on the consumption was extended to 10 years and 150,000 miles, which is a real remedy, and I'll credit it. But the actual mechanism, the thing that chokes those recirculation passages and cooks cylinder 1, never became a scheduled service item. Independent hybrid shops treat cleaning that circuit as basic preventive work and clean it on every 3rd-generation car they sell. The factory schedule sends you a coupon for a tire rotation. I don't know why that decision went the way it did, and I'm not going to invent a reason for you. What I can tell you is who eats the difference. $1,200 to $2,500 for a head gasket against $150 for the parts to clean it before it gets there. And the fluid. It doesn't say never change it. It says inspect. which sounds diligent right up until you realize an inspection is a technician forming an opinion, and a schedule that never requires the fluid to be replaced produces a car that reaches the end of its coverage period on its original fill, which is exactly what it was designed to do. That was never a claim about the fluid. It was a claim about the warranty. None of this needs a conspiracy. Every one of those decisions is defensible on its own, written by someone optimizing for warranty exposure and cost per unit, and every one lands at the same address. Yours, about 4 years after anybody at that company is responsible for you. That's the whole trick, and it stops working the second you can see it. You now know the difference between a schedule and a plan. There's something under all this worth saying plainly. A Toyota hybrid is a genuinely well-made thing. Somebody sat down and worked out that if you gave a planetary gear, set 2 electric machines, and enough computing power, you could delete the clutch, the belt, the torque converter, and the starter motor all at once. And then they went and built millions of them. That's not marketing. That's craft. And it's the kind that hides. The people who did it will never be named on the box. Because the machine doesn't owe you anything, and the company isn't your friend. And neither of those facts makes it a bad car. What it makes it is a thing you have to understand for yourself. That's not a burden. That's the oldest deal there is between a person and a piece of equipment. You learn how it behaves. You learn what it wants. You learn which parts of what you were told were about the machine and which parts were about somebody's liability window. And then it works for you for 20 years, which is roughly 10 years longer than anybody selling it to you expected you to care. So here's the whole thing back, in order, as a list of things to actually do. Once, this week, take the rear seat cushion out and look at the hybrid battery intake. A few clips and a trim tool. Vacuum the vent. Clean the fan duct if you're somewhere hot or dusty, and put a reminder in your phone for every 2 years or 30,000 miles. If it's a 2004 to 2009 car with no filter at all, do it more often. Once a year, pull a wheel, clean and grease the caliper slide pins, and look at both faces of every rotor for rust and scoring. Do not judge these brakes by pad thickness. Change the brake fluid on schedule and don't skip it, because that fluid is working inside an electronic actuator you cannot afford. Every 5,000 miles, change the oil, not 7, not 10, 5. Especially on a 2010 to 2015 car. Check the level between changes on those, and if it's using a quart in 1,000 or 2,000 miles, look up whether your in-service date still falls inside that 10-year, 150,000-mile coverage before you do anything else. Every 3 to 5 years, replace the 12-volt battery with a proper absorbed glass mat unit before it starts inventing faults for you to chase. If the car ever behaves like it's haunted, load test that battery before you pay anybody to diagnose anything. Every 60,000 miles, change the transaxle fluid with genuine ATFWS, roughly 5 quarts up front, 2 more in the rear differential if you have all-wheel drive. That's my call, not the factory's. And I've told you which is which. Once and then never again. Bolt a converter shield on if you own an early Prius or park it on the street. $250 against $2,000 to $3,000. On the 2010 to 2015 cars before 150,000 miles. Get the exhaust gas recirculation circuit cleaned. Intake manifold off, passages cleared, cooler cleaned out, and the procedure for a used one, since that's the question I get most, and a rule of thumb won't do it. 4 things, in this order. Service records. Find the oil change intervals and reject anything that ran long, because stretched oil is upstream of everything expensive on these. A real battery health report showing individual block voltages. If the seller won't get you one, that's your answer. The in-service date, so you know how much hybrid warranty is left and whether it transfers. And a stone-cold start first thing in the morning, standing outside the car, listening. Smooth start, records clean, blocks even, warranty still breathing. Buy it. Any one of those 4 wrong, and the price has to drop by the cost of fixing it, or you walk. It works on a 15-year-old Prius, and it works on a 3-year-old RAV4. Do the vent job this weekend, and here's what you'll get out of it. 40 minutes, 1 trim tool, and a small gray mat of felt in your hand that you did not know was there. You'll look at that and understand, in a way no video can give you, exactly how a $4,000 part dies. And then it won't, because you'll be back in 2 years. Now, the comments. I want to hear from the people who know more about these than I do. And specifically, I want to be corrected on one thing. The 3rd generation head gasket failures. I said the leading explanation is uneven cylinder heating from blocked recirculation passages, and I flagged that as the trade's best read rather than settled fact. If you're a hybrid tech who's had a stack of those heads off and you think it's something else, thermal cycling, the oil consumption doing the damage, the gasket material itself, a coolant routing issue, tell me. And tell me what you saw on the parts, not what you read. What was in your hands? And while you're there, mileage, model year, and what's failed. If you've got one past 250,000 miles on the original pack, say so and say where you live, because climate is doing more work in that number than anything else. If you've replaced a pack, tell me what it cost and who did it. Dealer, specialist, module rebuild. Because the honest range on that price is wider than anybody publishes. If this was useful, subscribe. There's a loose thread I deliberately didn't pull on today, and it's been bothering me for a while. The brake actuator. 2 separate coverage programs on 2 separate generations for what looks like the same class of internal leak. And I still can't work out whether the later cars genuinely fixed it or whether we just haven't reached the mileage where they start letting go. I'm digging into it. Look after the small cheap things, and the expensive ones look after themselves. That's the whole car, and honestly, that's most of them. See you next time.